Hello, welcome everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Monica and I am the moderator for today's webinar. Today's industry webinar, Deploying FDA-Ready Electronic Records Technology Leveraging the Cloud in Weeks, Not Years, is presented by Xcendia, Inc., and an analyst firm providing trusted advice to life science executives on business, technology, and regulatory issues, and Tulip, the leader in frontline operations, helping companies around the world equip their frontline workers, leading to improved productivity, higher quality, and increased efficiency across their operations. With Tulip's no-code platform, companies can empower those closest to operations to digitally transform processes, guide frontline workers, and gain real-time visibility into the people, tools, machines, and processes involved, all in a matter of days. Companies of all sizes across industries, including pharma, consumer electronics, aerospace and defense, contract manufacturing, automotive, apparel, medical devices, have implemented Tulip's intuitive platform to solve most of the pressing challenges in operations, error-proofing processes and boosting productivity with guided workflows, capturing and analyzing real-time data, and continuously improving operations. Today's presenters are, we have the honor of having Dr. Gilad Langer, Head of Customer Services and Life Sciences Practice Lead at Tulip. Dr. Langer is an accomplished business leader with 25 years of experience in IT, automation, and engineering services delivery, technical operations, business development, and sales. He has an accomplished track record of digital transformation to drive high levels of operational performance in manufacturing industries, with a specific focus in the regulated life sciences industries. His focus and passions are next generation Pharma 4.0, digital strategies and technologies for manufacturing. And we also welcome Daniel Matles, the president and founder of Xcendia, Inc. Dan has 3 decades of industry experience spanning the life sciences value chain. He is a member in the FDA's Case for Quality Initiative and FDA's Advisory Council on the enrichment in silico clinical trials. Dan has presented Xcendia research findings to industry executives and the FDA officials. He's a frequent lecturer at industry events and has published numerous research reports and articles on key issues facing the life sciences and healthcare industries. Now, without further ado, we turn over the webinar over to our panelists, Gilad and Dan.
Thank you, Monica. It's great to be speaking with you today, and I'm honored to be joined by Gilad Langer to discuss the topic of deploying FDA-ready electronic records technology, leveraging the cloud in days or weeks instead of years. Gilad, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm happy to be on the webinar and present some of these exciting and new ideas that we have.
Excellent. So just a little bit about our safe harbor statement. The content that Xcendia is going to be presenting today is based and sourced from our primary quantitative and qualitative research, interaction with FDA and global regulatory officials, industry executives, as well as our clients. So let's talk a little bit about our agenda. We're going to be talking first about what are FDA's expectations from companies when it comes to validating modern systems, right? Things have changed since the last guidance was written. We have new guidance. There's a really good opportunity for us to leverage that. We're then going to debunk some myths around the fact that these solutions take years to implement and a lot of effort to put in place. And Gilad is going to be sharing some real-world case studies. We're also going to talk about how do we transition digital systems from being process-centric to human-centric so that they're intuitive and effective. We're going to discuss how to achieve Pharma 4.0 with next-generation cloud solutions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So our first topic is around FDA's expectations. I've had the privilege of working with the agency for the last 4.5 years on this guidance that just came out September last month around computer software assurance. And one of the challenges that we've had implementing modern technology in our industry is the fact that the guidance that we have been using is 20 years old, written by Al Taylor and John Murray at the FDA. At the turn of the last millennium, and technology has evolved significantly over the last 20 years. However, the guidance that industry had has not. And the agency recognized this as a barrier to the implementation of new and modern technologies. And in the guidance itself, in the draft guidance, it talks about the fact that in recent years, advances in manufacturing technology have allowed industry to reduce the sources of error, optimize resources, and reduce patient risks. And the agency recognizes the potential of these technologies and has undertaken a number of initiatives to foster the adoption of these technologies. And this is important. Regulators are actually fostering and or driving us to adopt modern technology. They're not standing in the way. At this point, we are standing in the way. The regulators are enabling us to modernize. So what's the primary difference? If you look at the definition for validation in the original guidance, it talks about confirmation by examination and provision of objective evidence that software specifications conform to user needs and intended use, and that particular requirements implemented throughout the software can be consistently fulfilled. So it focuses on specifications and requirements. The guidance references computer software assurance. And when you look at assurance, it's the level of confidence that the software is free of vulnerabilities, either intentional or accidental, throughout the life cycle, and that the software functions in the intended manner. Does the software do what you want it to do, as opposed to does the software meet all the specification and requirements that you set forth? This is a tremendous change within our industry. And I've been in industry for 32 years now, and early on in my career, I was responsible for computer system validation at a very large medical device company. And when people came to me asking, what is it that I need to do to validate this new software? I broke out this Lotus 123 spreadsheet, and I went down and I said, you need a requirement spec and a design spec and a trace matrix, and I need unit system integration testing documentation, IQ, OQ, PQ, validation summary report. When you're done with all those documents, come back. So our focus historically over the last 20 plus years has been on documentation, testing activities, and assurance. Very little critical thinking took place. CSA actually turns the triangle upside down, and it starts with critical thinking. What is the intended use? What is the risk associated with this particular feature or function? Then look at the assurance needs, then focus on what are the appropriate testing activities, and last but not least, document those. We always need to have proper documentation. However, the level of documentation needs to be of value to your organization, not only to the auditor. And unfortunately, many companies have focused on creating validation documentation just for when the auditor comes in. The other important transition that we're seeing within the agency is the focus from compliance to quality. Compliance is always going to be the baseline for our industry. We must comply with all regulatory requirements, but the focus is on outcomes. And Dr. Woodcock shared the vision for FDA pharmaceutical quality as a maximally efficient, agile, and flexible manufacturing sector that reliably produces high quality drugs without extensive regulatory oversight. So here is top brass within the agency telling us that we need to be more efficient, more agile, and more flexible so that we can produce high quality products without extensive regulatory oversight. And this is a tremendous shift within our industry. And while the FDA has been talking and sharing and educating industry around this. As an industry, we still have a lot of what we like to call regulatory inertia. We're used to doing things the way we've always done it. And if you always do what you've always done, then you always get what you've always gotten. And then we're surprised that we're implementing new technology and it still takes us forever to implement and validate. So with that, Gilad, can you share your experiences from working with your clients around the FDA expectations and how companies have actually validated modern platforms?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dan. Again, I'm going to take a step back and reiterate kind of what Dan was mentioning about. In our traditional world, we are very used to having these two tracks, right? We validate the process, which is its own project, if you will, and then comes the validation of software as per our traditional CAMP models with the IQ, OQ, PQ. It's basically a separate project that runs in parallel to the process. The process validation sometimes is kind of after the fact. And, with everything that Dan said, that is not going to work in the future because of many reasons. And so, when we start looking at the implementation of this CSA, and part of this, by the way, is work that is out of the Pharma 4.0 group. So if you're not familiar, the ISP has a Pharma 4.0 working group. Under that, there's also a Validation 4.0 working group. And we have actually published a number of articles and a number of blog posts, et cetera, around this topic. So the new model, it takes the CSA and tries to translate it. What does that mean in practice? So, validating for intended use means like, let's focus on the process, right? So the process at the center, and the process at the center, in the, again, critical thinking is, what are you concerned about? That to show that we're in control and we have quality of product, that we, when we release products to the market, we have the right quality and we're in control of that quality. So really, that's what you need to prove from an intended use perspective, and the process and the software that runs the process becomes one thing, and you validate the whole thing, meaning process and everything that goes into managing the process. So if you have, some filling line runs with some kind of automation, and there's some notion of a software system that captures your batch record, that is considered a system, and we validate the system for intended use. The software, basically, you need to show that the software, satisfies what you understand as requirements, and we'll get to that in just a second as well. Now, if you think about it, we're also talking about a change of how we do software, right? So instead of having these big monolithic systems, we're now looking at modern technology that is really kind of, it is built bottoms up. It's made of these things called apps, which are discrete pieces of software that run part of the process, and they have a life cycle, right? It's not static. That's the other thing that you notice. Everything is a circle, and that there's a reason to it. So let's just take an example here. Let's say that you want to have some new digital form of an app that helps you do a setup operation as part of of your processing line, and you need to validate that. Well, first of all comes the idea of we need that, and we need to digitize that. We then define requirements. Now, requirements are not in the notion of your traditional URS. And if you back to Dan's work, if you really look back on what URSs are defined by, the methodology of defining the system shall, that dates back to mainframe. And I asked, I was with another call and I asked people if they even know what a mainframe is. Mainframe is so old and many people don't even know what they are. But yet we use methodologies from that era. So defining requirements, if you take a look at some of the guidance we're working as part of Validation 4.0, talks about process maps, talks about new ways of defining requirements. It doesn't have to have this you shall, very long document. Then you take those requirements and you start building your first notion of an app. And this is iterative, right? Next comes, okay, once we've built some notion of the app, we want to put it in the field and test and validate that, publish it so we can get some feedback from operators about how it's going, collect that feedback. Now, again, these apps are digital. They actually collect data automatically. We see what's going on, and then we can improve, right? But then this can all happen in a matter of a week. And now we have to do it over again, right? So think about it. If we have to do it at this rapid pace, in a cycle. We cannot have weeks long or months long processes of defining requirements and getting them approved. This needs to work much faster. And really, what I'm saying here is that understand that if we are going to work at this speed, there is no way that we can do things the way we have traditionally done it. And the good news is the guidance is helping us. There are some best practices that are coming out of ISP and others that actually show this, and we have in practice examples of this. So if we go to the next slide, this is an example of a medical device company that has come up with a novel technology around blood purification. So they're pretty new in terms of this. They just got their device approved, and now they said, well, we're not going to go traditional on this. So we're not going to have paper on the floor. We're going to go digital, and we need to do this at the speed that is orders of magnitude faster than anything we've seen so far. And so in this case, they adopted Tulip as the technology for capturing the batch record, and they were able to have approved, validated, we call them apps, on the floor to collect data as part of their electronic device history record in 10 weeks. 10 weeks from, oh, this is a great idea, to we are actually producing products with this with this software. And again, it's not because they focused on the software itself. They focused on the process, and they basically took, when their process was validated and ready to go and licensed, well, the software was as well, because it's part of this intended use. And that's kind of the idea behind it. I apologize for we don't have the names of the companies, but you guys are all from the industry, and you know how sensitive you all are in terms of us plastering names and logos on. So, but again, if you reach out to us one-on-one, I think we can probably share some of this information. So with that, Dan, I'll pass it on to you, and we can continue the discussion.
Great. And Gilad, you brought some excellent points. If you look at the original guidance, when it talks about IQ, OQ, and PQ, the guidance itself discusses the fact that those terms are really not applicable to software development. However, because that's what industry is used to, and that's what regulators were used to, the agency decided to include that terminology. The same thing if you look at some of the capabilities, we all got stuck on the waterfall model. And I asked Al Taylor, why did you put the waterfall model in the guidance? And he said, because it's easy to explain. However, if you look at the next section within that very same guidance, it talks about concurrent engineering or concurrent design, which is what we now call Agile. And that section tells you all of the pitfalls of using a waterfall model. So I think that the challenge is, as an industry, historically, we have been very conservative, very concerned. And frankly, the agency or the regulators have fostered that, what Dr. Shuren calls whack-a-mole interaction between regulators and the industry. But now the regulators are recognizing that and are really enabling us and driving us to implement modern technology. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about how we can debunk these myths that these solutions take years and a lot of effort to implement with some real world case studies. So the first thing we want to do is ask you to provide us your input in a quick poll. This poll is completely anonymous. Gilad nor I will get to see who answered what. What we want to understand is, if you think about the last time your organization implemented an enterprise-wide system, whether that was MES or PLM or ERP or QMS or LIMS or any of the other 3 or 4 letter acronym systems we know and love, how long did it take you to implement that across your organization? Was it weeks? Was it months? Or was it years? Pick one of the options and let us know so that we can see how long has it taken historically, and how long did it take your organization to implement one of these solutions? So not surprisingly, over 50% of the respondents told us that it took them years. And that is what it took. That's what it used to take. And in fact, that's what it still takes many companies. 46% told us months, and not a single respondent said that it was done in weeks. Gilad, does this surprise you at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
So I think this is the opportunity. How can we move to transition to doing it a lot more quickly? And one of the reasons that this takes so long, we actually at Xcendia came up with this digital sustainability model. And if you look at the current state, many companies are still using paper binders in some places within the organization. Then, in the 60s, paper on glass came about with mainframes and some of those solutions coming onto the floor. Then we had standalone solutions in the 80s, and in the 2000s, we had integrated solutions. But the problem with all of these is that they're very rigid. They're very challenging to upgrade. That's why in many cases, as an industry, we're at N-2 or N-3 versions from current. And these are very challenging to manage. You need experts in order to roll them out and manage them. The opportunity, though, is you can leapfrog from wherever you are to what we call a digitally sustainable approach. And that means proactively seeking tomorrow's technology today. Now, the leading edge or the current state of that technology today is the cloud. But at some point in the not too distant future, the cloud is going to be last generation. So let's continuously look ahead. Many companies are currently using quantum computing for specific applications. It doesn't lend itself to everything, but the opportunity here is how can we become sustainable from a digital standpoint? And that means looking for applications that are based on industry standards rather than do what we do. It's 80% what do you need it to do, 20% your uniqueness. These applications are effective and frictionless. So it's not just about digitizing the current process, it's about transforming it. It's about that paradigm shift from we're doing paper or we're doing an archaic system. Let's just not bring our baggage to the cloud. It's about building digital fabric. So all these systems have a digital thread, but unfortunately, sometimes when you have all these threads, they get mungled up into that ball of thread of yarn that you can't tease apart. So how do you weave that into a digital fabric? It needs to be a modern platform, highly configurable, something that as the needs change, you can hyper configure. It needs to be resilient, a unified process and data. It doesn't mean monolithic, but it does require you to have visibility across the processes and across the data. And it needs to be focused on outcomes and on digital evidence. So with that, Gilad, can you share some real-world examples based on your experiences that debunk these myths and how your clients have been able to implement solutions quickly and effectively?
Yes, of course. So, and before we do that, again, I want to go back a bit and take a look at, how we used to do things. And unfortunately, also, that some companies are still doing this way. But, if we take a look at specifically master records and history records, which is a central component of compliance around, our life sciences processes, we typically start with paper or unstructured data. That usually is paper. That defines the process. It can be a paper batch record or a paper device history, a device record. And then we have to take that record and we need to translate it into the software's monolithic definition of master data. Meaning, if you're in the pharma industry, it means some form of an IS-88 type recipe model that relates. Now that, if you think about it, that's a huge translation. Not a lot of people speak IS-88 recipe model. So you need to teach them, or sometimes you have to take specialized people with that skill set, and that takes a lot of time. Now that you've done that, the implications of that, even from a regulatory perspective, you've changed basically the way you're defining the process. So you have to go sometimes even back to regulators and say, hey, I have a new definition of how I make my product. And then you have to validate that. So now you have to validate this new way, this new process, and validate the system in which it runs. And we are, maybe at this point we're 12 months into it, if you know what you're doing. This is a best case scenario where you know the system, you've implemented it before, et cetera. So at this point you have a validated system that runs, this very rigid, complicated process model, and you have to go to your operators on the floor and teach them how to use this system, because the system is not designed for them. It's designed to execute on a hierarchical process definition. And so, you get past that, hypercare and all that 3 months in. So you're, at this point, a year and a half into it, and all the data that you capture goes into this big monolithic proprietary database that you can't read. So you need to go to some specialized IT skill to take that data out. And what do? They create reports that come out in the form of a PDF. And so what have you done? You've spent millions of dollars and a lot of time, and you basically went from paper to paper, which is, not digital. It's not, and not what we're looking for. And just a part of that I want to reflect on what I hear from customers. That this notion of that the regulators want to see the records, in some form of readable format. Actually, the regulators, if you ask the people that have been in audits recently, the regulator is asking actually to see it digitally. So the fact that you're showing them something that looks like paper is not necessarily good, right? So that's just a kind of an artifact of what we hear. But let's take a look at it from the perspective of a new modern digital system. And here we start with the same thing. We start with paper, but we need to translate that paper in a form, in a platform that lets us use it like a PowerPoint, like an Excel sheet. So it's no code. It's digitally it's meant for digitally native people, and the translation is kind of a one-to-one. You're taking what you see on paper, not on paper and glass, but you're just digitizing the process, and that goes very fast. And you do it bottoms up, as I mentioned before, one app at a time. So within 3 to 6 weeks, you already have something on the floor that is run by operators that understand it because it was meant for them and it's built for them, with aids like videos and interaction with them. And since you're using a cloud-based qualified platform, and you're qualifying these apps for intended use, as I mentioned before, right? Within 6 to 12 weeks, you actually have software on the floor running, collecting data in a manner that you can interpret. The data that you collect and see in the cloud looks like a spreadsheet, and you can report on it like a spreadsheet. So you can create digital forms of it that is viewable not only for the auditors, but you can use internally as well. It's make much more sense for you to use because now you have the form, and all this in a matter of 6 to 12 weeks. And this is on the outer edge. Actually, we've seen this happen much faster, and all of this adheres to CSA, is fully qualified, fully validated. Validated. There are actually no issues there. The only roadblock that we encounter is the mindset of the people within our customers that still can't get their head out of the paper. And again, it's relating back to the work that I'm doing as part of the ISP Pharma 4.0 group. And if you read some of the content that we're putting out, we talk a lot about changing the document mindset. We need to get our heads out of the paper. We need to understand that in the modern world, data is digital. That doesn't mean it's not evidence. It does not mean that you cannot show it to an auditor. So again, we're going from this notion of monolithic, start by paper, don't do anything until we have 18 months, until we have something valid on the floor. So the sad part of it, and really what the regulators are trying to help us with, is that it is no way that we can be sustainable as an industry if we have to wait years to show value from a system. And that's exactly what's going on. Traditional monolithic systems takes years to implement, but even more importantly, it takes years to show value, right? And sometimes the value that they show is already not the value that you needed because the world has changed. Now, in the new world, we're taking this bottoms-up approach, right? One app at a time, when we're building value as it goes, and we're doing much faster. So take a look at this slide. The scales on the top and on the bottom are orders of magnitude. It's 18 months versus 18 weeks, right? And we're showing value within the first few weeks. That is, that is what the industry wants, right? The regulators are telling us, we don't want to stand in the way of you creating value. And this is what this approach does, right? So if anything that you take out of this, right, just as a way to discern whether a technology is Pharma 4.0 or not, just ask, how long is it going to take me to implement it or to show value from the system? If the answer is months or years, you do not have a Pharma 4.0 type of technology. So again, in practice, taking back to what Dan talked about, this notion of agile continuous improvement. This notion of continuous improvement, lean, agile, really dates back to the 80s. If you take a look at some of the concepts that are core to Industry 3.0 even, design for manufacture, QBD. QBD stems from the automotive industry back in the 80s and the 90s. So when we look at putting new technologies and validating new technologies, we have to adopt this notion of continuous improvement, bottoms up. And what does that translate to? So if you take a look at this process, in the way that we implement a Tulip, we start the first sprint, we call it design and training. Basically, let's take a look at a bit of solution design, and let's take a look about, let's help you kind of understand the system. That happens within the week. But in that week is when we define the requirements that we are going to validate on, right? And these are really defined as process maps and user stories. So the first week of doing anything, because it's a small discrete cycle we're doing, is definition of what we're going to validate against. Then we iterate through and build. That doesn't mean that the requirements are static. Each iteration, you're working with your requirements. When you're getting ready to validate, you have an app, then it's just validating for intended use against what you define as the process, which is defined in a process map, and you're ready to go live, and you can do that. We've seen that happen within 3 weeks. So let's take a case study. And this one, again, I apologize for not having the logos. We're not allowed to. Again, if you reach out, we can talk about it. This is actually, for me, is near to heart because it was my first experience with digital technologies, and it was an eye-opener for me. So this is a case of a Greenfield medical device company, again, with a novel home device for dialysis. They had a Greenfield site, and they needed to ship their first device in a matter of 5 months. That was the challenge. The challenge is we cannot adopt traditional technology because it's not fast enough. We have a Greenfield site. We have committed to have a first licensed device or approved device out to customers within 5 months. And so we went hand in hand and built or digitized their plant from an empty shell of just a building to a full-blown manufacturing facility that with first device out of production or into customers' hands in 5 months. And the interesting thing about this process was that it was really done. So it was done by one process engineer. So one process engineer who was tasked with defining the process. So initially he drew up Word documents with the manufacturing instructions and the DHR. He learned Tulip within a week, and then within a matter of 3 months, created 90 apps that run the complete process end to end, all the way through packaging, with very little or minimal help from the supplier, from us, from Tulip. And then we actually had, I would say that the validation took a month, but it was a hybrid of the old versus and the new, because again, the company was, QA people were changing their mindset, et cetera. Now they do it obviously much faster. But within 5 months, and the first product was out the door. And of course, the 5 months, the timeline of the 5 months was not constrained by the software. It was constrained by other things, physical things in their manufacturing facility. And apart from the fact that you comply now and you have a full device integrator, this is a modern digital system that actually helps the operators do their work with pictolights and visual aids, and it takes them, as you can see, through the process. When they could bring transient workforce into the plant, and within a few days show them and teach them, and the system guides them, captures errors, which is even more important. So the kind of release by exception type of methodology was put in. And again, all this in a matter of, and my reflection back on this, so after 3 months, when this was going on, and I said, they told me we're ready to validate, and I looked back and it goes, wow, 3 months, like something does not feel right here. Like, how can we do this fast? And it was just one person that did all this. And, so I was very hesitant, like, oh, are we really ready for validation here? And the fact of the matter, we were. So I'd love to talk about this more, but give it back over to Dan. We have a few more things to cover.
Excellent. Thanks, Gilad. And you brought up a couple of excellent points. The fact that the regulators are transitioning from documented evidence, i.e. documents, to digital evidence. You hear them talk more about digital evidence. And also, agency just released a new guidance around remote regulatory assessments. They're here to stay. So you can't share paper. They want to get all of the data in the original format so that they can use it to conduct that investigation. So let's do another quick poll. And we want to know from you, in your opinion, are your current systems process-centric or human-centric? Once again, all the responses are anonymous. We're not going to know the answer, but we want to know whether in your organization are most of the systems focusing on the process or focusing on the human. So again, 77% are telling us that their processes are, or their current systems are focusing on processes, and only 23% are focusing on the human. Not surprising, this is the current state, but we think there's an opportunity to transition to a different approach. And to Gilad's point, or Gilad and I have been both alluding to the fact that the challenge is not technology. We did a recent poll, and you can see only 1% of respondents told us that the primary barrier to digital transformation within life sciences is technology. The technology is here, it's mature, it's ready. Yes, we obviously need to make a business case for it, and we do need to have proper regulatory frameworks. And now we do. This poll was done actually in a webinar with FDA right before the new guidance came out. So now we no longer have the excuse that we don't have the appropriate regulatory frameworks. However, the top reason, the primary barrier to digital transformation within our industry is culture, is our people. Culture is people. It's about humans. We need to change the way we think. We need to understand what are the challenges. And we recently did a large market research report around digital transformation in manufacturing and life sciences. And what you can see on the left-hand side is those organizations that have a culture that aligns regulatory frameworks with digital transformation. 91% of those organizations are undergoing digital transformation, compared to those who told us that their culture does not believe that regulatory frameworks support digital transformation. Now, the regulatory frameworks are the same. The difference is the interpretation and the ways that those organizations are looking at digital transformation and implementing that. So with that in mind, again, how are companies transitioning to this human-centric approach in your experience?
Well, unfortunately, I think at this point they're not, and that's kind of the issue. If you take a look at numbers, and there's a lot of research around this space, but you can see that only 41% of companies have some kind of digital strategy, initiatives, et cetera, and those are really mixed, kind of a mixed bag. Because they don't know what they're doing, and obviously the results are not there, and that's what that 70% really talks about. Because I think what's going on is that we don't understand what this paradigm shift is, right? So we're taking what we know as digital technology, and this is kind of what's hard between this Industry 4.0, Pharma 4.0, and the old, because it's not that we did not use computer systems in the past. It's kind of a new breed, a new generation of systems. So it's very easy to say, oh, I have my electronic system, but that's not necessarily a digital system. And so they're expensive, they're siloed. It takes too much time to maintain them and everything that And I think, from hearing from peers in the industry, it's not that we are not aware of the pains, but actually we don't know what to do with that. So, I think the important piece of this is that, it's actually pretty easy to discern whether this technology you're looking at is digital or not, or is Pharma 4.0 ready or not, right? Just start with a few simple things. This one size fits all is not the way of the digital wave. Just reflect on your everyday life and how you use digital technology. And I ask people, like, how many apps do you have on your iPhone? On average, that's between 50 and 70, right? It's not, I don't go, if in my daily life, I don't go to my one application that's called SAP, like the SAP of the home, right? Even if you go to Google and Amazon, they still support like a multitude of different systems. So, it's that. The new digital systems should address all the pains that you know from your traditional systems. That's one thing. And the last part, which is really what I want to talk about and where the poll is this notion of human-centric. So you can see that one of the, I talked about first thing to figure out if this is digital technology or not, or Pharma 4.0 or not, is speed. Like, how fast can I get it in? And it has to be, we're talking about minutes, hours, weeks. This next thing is does it take the human in the center? And that's what the question is. Traditional system took the human, put him aside, take a look at the process, and the focus is on the process. In the new world, we're looking at the human as the center. If you take a look at all the digital technologies that you use in your everyday life, they put you in the center. And that's part of it. Like, how does it help me become more productive? And once you look at that from my perspective, how it makes me, or the human, or the operator, the frontline operator, more productive, right? It addresses the things that from a manufacturing, like fewer errors, getting quality us, less downtime, right? These are things that we can get humans to help with, right? And the human benefits is like, we cannot consider humans just a machine. It's not a robot. Actually, they're pretty smart and they can help us. And the key to productivity is through the humans. And I bring a quote from Jeff Immelt, who was interviewed at one of the podcasts. And he says, one of the interesting things about this new digital technology is that it gives the frontline operator a voice, which, has happened in the desktop world and in the retail world, but it gives the person working the line a voice and uses and capitalizes on the human intelligence. So here we have another case study. In this case, medical device. This is and we do have the thank you very much to Dentsply Sirona for allowing us to showcase this. But this is end of line quality check and packaging of a kit that goes to the dentist for an implant. So it's not only the implant. There's all these extra pieces in there, spacers and tools, etc. go in a kit. You can see there's a Pictolite at the bottom. It lights up the bin that he needs to collect. So it works with a human hand in hand, guiding him through what he needs to do. With that, reducing errors, intuitively working with the operator. It's not a system that he has to serve, meaning telling the system, I just did that. The system tracks what he does, and he doesn't have to tell it what it does. It kind of operates with him. The interesting part of this in terms of how productivity gain in digital technology is that the majority of the issues that they had around their quality was because when this kid comes to the dentist, so you're sitting in the dentist's office, and he's ready to put the implant in you. He opens the kit and something drops off, or these are pretty small things. And he says, "Well, this kit is not good." So he reports a complaint, goes back to the supplier and says, "This kit was incorrect, the quality bad." So there was a lot of incoming complaint about bad quality because there was missing parts in the kit. So what they did was at the end of the line, they basically put a camera, and when the operator put the kit on the camera, he took a picture. Was recorded as part of the DHR, and now when the dentist called in and said, "Hey, this picture," they looked at the picture and they told them, "No, it isn't. We actually can see all the parts in here." So think about the amount of effort that was reduced in managing complaints, doing all these extra searches, and to make sure that the quality responding, all that went away. So the reduction in the ROI was amazing on this thing, just because a digital system allowed you to take a picture, something that takes literally minutes to do in this software.
So I think one of the big challenges is around next generation cloud solutions, right? So not all clouds are created equal. The reality is, some vendors are putting their on-prem or their traditional applications and hosting it in the cloud. That is not a cloud native application. That is an application that is served up in the cloud. It's hosting. We've done it for decades. But the opportunity is, how can we truly leverage modern cloud platforms? And when we asked how are organizations approaching digital transformation, it's very good to see that 63% say that they're leveraging modern cloud platforms. Now, are they all there yet? Absolutely not. Where it's a journey. You're never done with transformation. But it's very encouraging to see that we're moving forward. Now, those 25% who are not planning to digitally transform, good luck to them. They're happy with their paper blankies, and they'll keep doing it that way. But in order to succeed, we need to move forward and we need to digitally transform. So with that in mind, talk a little bit about how companies are using the next generation cloud solutions to implement Pharma 4.0.
Yeah, so I mean, the simple answer and the easy answer is actually pretty simple. And remember, old systems are complex and take a lot of effort. New systems are not. Mm-hmm. Think about digital technology you use every day. You install an app and you start using it. That's the same way. So if you think about the cloud solutions that are already in life sciences, the platforms are actually pre-qualified. They actually run, and to use them, all you have to do is create a username, and you're ready to use. And so what do? You walk onto your floor and start looking for where there are areas that we can implement and digitize our processes. And it could be in simple parts of, instructions and collecting data for your EBR, line clearances, logbooks. So just, it's like line clearances and logbooks. If you're looking for paper in our industry, that's where they are, yeah. Right? Because there's been some effort in trying to digitize EBRs, but like logbooks and line clearances, low-hanging fruit. Those are places where you can immediately start digitizing with apps. And one of the things that you get with that is also you're digitizing the process. You actually can see what people are, how fast things are moving and where the errors are. So that's kind of the easy. And so again, you do that because you just latch on to this natural continuous improvement in manufacturing. We are manufacturers. Lean as a concept is there. Continuous improvement, everybody has. And these new technologies basically align with that. They're agile, means that they think in cycles. We showed you already 2 cycles, the validation cycle, the app approval life cycle. You just latch on to a continuous improvement cycle. Go to your frontline operators, look for what they need, create an app, digitize their processes, get data in real time within a few weeks, look at what's going on, process, optimize. And again, and our validation life cycle needs to adapt to that. That's what the regulators are telling us. They should not stop us. And if you do that, you can realize value very, very fast. And I'm talking about realizing value within weeks. Nobody can argue with realizing value within weeks. If you want to go back to your management and say like, oh, I want to try digital technology, if you can go back and say, look, I did this in 3 weeks and I'm showing value, nobody can argue against that. And we have examples of these are real-time examples of like, reducing just setup times in line clearances. How much time you in life sciences spend in line clearances and this and paperwork. I mean, what's funny? The first line in most of these line clearances are make sure that all the paper is gone. Yeah. Like that's what you go into your and get rid of all the paper because you don't want to have paper from the old batch to the new batch. Yeah. I mean that's just ridiculous, right? Just funny. We're running around and doing these things. So again, it's very, very simple, right? You do a Gemba walk. You go to your plant. You talk to your frontline operators. Do you digitize their processes? You go to as an engineer, and then you basically apply, you give your frontline operators tools that they can use to make them more productive, to help them and give them a voice. Remember what I said, give them a voice. That's part of this new thing. I want to share a quick, this is the impact effort matrix. This is not a new invention. This existed for quite a while. If you do your Gemba walk and come with a few ideas, focus on your low-hanging fruit, quick implementations, very high value, right? With this, and again, I can't emphasize how easy enough this is to do with tools today. If you sign up to Tulip, even just a free trial, you get access to the full-blown system within a matter of seconds. There's nothing stopping you. It's a fully qualified platform, and I think there was a question about that. Mm-hmm. And start prioritizing and start doing this. And my challenge to you as an industry is, right, how fast can you do this? Are you digitizing your shop floor? You don't have to wait for anything to come down from the heavens or from your IT or management. Like you can do this today. So I would like to see more of the industry transforming, not only in my time with Tulip, but again, I'm working very hard in the industry with our Pharma 4.0 group. We do hackathons, we do a bunch of different things to try and move the industry away from this notion of paper, away from this notion that, oh shit, I need to take 3 months to get my QA to validate my URS. This is all things of the past.
Yep.
So thanks, Dan, for having me, and thanks for letting me share.
Excellent. Thanks, Gilad. What we'll do now is open it up for questions. We already have a couple of questions that have come in. So let's start with those. And actually, these are not unusual, right? The questions are around how does the guidance apply to multi-tenant SaaS clouds? And then how do you actually validate, or are there FDA approved systems? So let me take a quick crack at that first and set the record straight. FDA does not approve any applications, right? So it's still the burden of the manufacturer to ensure that the application meets your intended use. However, what the guidance does is it shifts some of that burden to the developer of the software, especially when you're dealing with a SaaS and a multi-tenant SaaS, where the vendor is going to be rolling out that new version of the software, typically 3 or 4 times a year, whether you're ready or not. And in order to achieve that, you need to change the mindset. To Gilad's point, if it's going to take your quality department 3 months to approve the requirement spec, by the time you get to your traditional PQ and validation summary report, you're 4 versions behind. So what the guidance does is it enables you as the manufacturer to actually take credit. That's the word that Francisco Vicenti at FDA likes to use, the phrase, take credit for the work that your vendor has done. Your vendor can actually qualify the platform, to Gilad's point, and ensure that all the out-of-the-box features and functions, all of the features and functions that they have designed work as intended based on how they intend them to be used. And then your role becomes, how do I ensure that my configuration of those features and functions meet your intended use? So it does require a total mindset. Gilad, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I agree 100% what you said. I just bring in practice, right? So Tulip, we actually are on a 2-week Agile cycle. We actually publish or release software every 2 weeks. Life sciences gets, is a bit afraid of that, so we have a special version. We call it an LTS. It comes out 3 times a year, again in the same fashion. Most of our customers, they've first of all, we're ISO certified. We have a QMS in place. You audit us, you take credit, as Dan said. And in fact, all the information is available online digitally. There's no documents, and so you take credit for this. And when the new qualified platform is released, it's in a controlled manner. It gets released, and you do whatever extra testing that you need to do on your end. But basically, that takes just a few hours, and you're ready to go.
And that really is that mindset, that culture change, overcoming the internal regulatory inertia. That regulators are taking away the excuses from us to say it's too hard. They're really facilitating the process. So we have another question around the scope of the Pharma 4.0 hackathons, and is participation open? How does that work, Gilad? I know you mentioned it, so it's a question for you.
Yeah, the participation is open. They come out, they get released. The next one is actually in Europe, in Vienna, and it's hosted by Takeda, who is doing it. So you can, if you are an ISP member, all that should be available, and I can share it first. I guess Brian, who I know, who asked the question, I can share that information with you. But you have to go to Vienna, Brian.
It's a good excuse to travel.
Yeah.
We have another question around a company that has an MES, and what's the best way to create applications while still having that MES in place? Is there a specific use case that's best practice to start based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, there's been a lot of investment in these traditional software, and nobody's going to rip that out anytime soon. So it's a very, very important scenario. I would say again, you do your walk and look for the white spaces. Where does your existing MES not cover? What area doesn't cover, and start augmenting the MES there, with the potential of actually integrating to it, basically using it as a system of record. It's this notion of what we call system of engagement versus system of record, where you use modern digital tools to be, proactively help the operator do what it's supposed to do, but still send the information to your system of record. But if not, light clearances, all the other stuff that goes around that MES doesn't cover, you can start applying digital tools there very easily. And I have not seen a traditional MES that covers more than, I would say, at best, 75% of the process it's supposed to cover. Yep. And then, there's also areas where it's just too expensive to put. So go there.
Yep.
White spaces.
Excellent. We have another question. When you say it takes you weeks to validate an application, do you mean perform the IQ, OQ, and PQ, or also the URS, FS, and so on? And again, if you look, I would really encourage you to look at the new guidance. There is no mention in the guidance about IQs, OQs, and PQs. And the focus in the guidance is around features and functions, the risk associated with those features and functions, and your intended use. And the best way to document that, or to provide digital evidence that you've done that, is not necessarily through a requirement document in the traditional sense, that, as Gilad said, thou shall, but instead a process diagram with what are your design inputs, what are your design outputs, and how do you make that happen? Gilad, can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, exactly. So, this is so we have to remember, it's a paradigm shift. It's a change of mindset. What we know of today is not what's going to happen in the future. It's the technology, hits and validation as well. We really IQ, OQ, PQ. This is the way we've done things in the past. It's not how things are going to be done in the future. You need to make, think about it. You need to show that you're in control of the product quality. Critical thinking. How does it impact quality? Right. So CPP, CQAs. Think for those and think about what functions in the software that you're putting in addresses those, and just focus on making sure that you are in control of those critical parameters. And again, it's actually super easy because these digital tools capture so much data that you can just do a simple graph that shows that your CPP and CQAs are in line. And you can just say, is this graph, test that the graph shows right data. And that's it. That's basically all you need. So, that's the function. The graph of the CQA is the function. You test it and you're done.
Yep. Excellent. So Gilad, we're come to the top of the hour. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing your insights around deploying FDA-ready electronic record systems using cloud solutions in weeks instead of years. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank Tulip for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you, Gilad.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Excellent. Enjoy the rest of your day.